I bought my first home at 25 years old, and before you assume that I had a rich parent or some trust fund, let me stop you right there because I didn't. I was working a regular job, making a regular salary, and I was fresh out of school as well. But I did do a few things differently that allowed me to buy a home way earlier than most people think is possible. So if you're wondering how to actually save for your first home when you're young, then this video is for you. I'm going to walk you through exactly how I did it, the hacks, the budgeting, the saving strategy, and all the things I wish someone had told me before I got started. So let's get into it. So I need you to put in some prep work right here, because the one thing that made me successful is that 1 or 2 years before I even went to look at homes, I was already doing my calculations, doing all the research, seeing what rights I had, regulations I could make use of. I really went into the process knowing everything. At some point, I remember I was the one explaining things to my mortgage advisor instead of him explaining it to me, and I 100% believe that that's what led me to my success in buying a home. So the first thing that I need you to do is to figure out how much house you can actually afford. And I don't mean how much the bank says you can afford. I mean how much you can afford without becoming house poor. Because banks and mortgage brokers, they will usually approve you for a mortgage based on a multiple of your income. And there are loads of calculators online that show you approximately how much you could get in terms of a mortgage. I need you to find the ones for your country and do a few of those calculators, and you can get a ballpark figure somewhere between all of those options. But here's the key. I need you to set your budget at least 10 to 15% under the maximum that you can get. Because I don't want you to be in a situation where you own a house but you cannot pay for anything else because all your income is going towards your mortgage. That is called being house poor, and it is miserable and super common. The reason why so many people are house poor is because they really underestimate how much it costs to finance all the other things that come with owning a house. For example, energy prices have become almost 4 times more expensive ever since I bought my house 5 years ago. Now, if I didn't have a cushion in my income, then that would be a hard pill to swallow. Then you also need to save for when things break, because things will inevitably break. Your boiler, your roof, your appliances. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And you need to be able to put money aside for those instances. So make sure you're not getting the maximum mortgage that you can get. You need breathing room. And remember that you also need to be able to live your life, go on vacation, handle emergencies, and not feel suffocated by your monthly payment. If it will be tight for you, if you need your maximum in order to be able to buy a house, then maybe you should be asking yourself if it's even worth owning the home right now. All right, so now that you have set your maximum budget, you can use that to figure out how much you need for a down payment. And this is different for every country. In most European and North American markets, it will be 10 to 20%, but I want you to have an actual number here. So again, you need to look this up. Just Google down payment calculator plus your country, and you will find calculators and breakdowns that are specific to your market. You only need 5 minutes to do this research and come up with a number. Please do so because it does matter. Then I want you to figure out all the other costs that you need to take into account. So think things like taxes, notary fees, inspection costs, transfer fees, all of that. Honestly, all of this is Googleable and it's not hard to find. So now you have 2 numbers, your down payment plus the extra costs that you're going to make to be able to buy the home, right? But we're not done yet, because I also want you to add moving costs and furniture. Keep it simple. You can add a lot of things later on, because buying a house when you're young, when you're in your 20s and 30s, it's already hard enough. You don't need to be super fancy. You don't need to have the best decor from the get-go. Just accept that you will change things later on. But of course, some things are necessary. So calculate how much you need to make it livable to your standards. Maybe that's a bed, a couch, a table, basic kitchen stuff. Also, don't underestimate things like painting costs, because I always would be like, oh, but we're doing the painting ourselves, so it can't be that expensive. But paint and buying stuff like hardware for your home is actually quite expensive. So make sure that you're taking that into account in your budget. So now we have 3 numbers, your down payment, your home buying costs, and your decoration budget, and that's your total savings target. That's the number that you're going to work towards. And now comes the hard part, actually saving that money. So here's what most people mess up. A lot of people approach saving by just coming up with a ballpark number of what they want to put aside every month. Or they say, I'm just going to save whatever is left at the end of the month, which, let's be honest, is usually nothing. So when you're saving for a specific goal, like buying a home, what you want to do is you want to reverse engineer. So let me show you what that would look like. Let's say your total savings target is $30,000. Now ask yourself, when do I want to buy my home? Let's say you want to buy it in 3 years. That means you have 36 months, and 30,000 divided by 36 months is about $833 per month. So that means that's what you need to save every single month to hit your goal in 3 years. Now, maybe that number feels impossible. Maybe you're thinking there's no way I can save $800 a month. There are other ways to speed things up, right? You can invest part of your savings to help it grow faster. I will get into that in a minute. You can transfer any bonus, tax returns, or any like nice financial surprise that you didn't expect to your savings account. I did that for a whole year. Anything that I would get that would be extra, I would put into my home savings account, and it really sped things up for me. Or maybe you have a race coming up and then you could start saving a lower amount right now and just increase it once the race kicks in. And if none of that works, you can always adjust your timeline, because what if you give yourself 5 years instead, right? As I said, you don't want things to be too tight. The point is that you're working backwards from your goal to figure out what you need to do every single month to get there. You're not just guessing, you're not just putting, a random number aside. You have a concrete number and a concrete plan. Now, I always say that in order to save, you need to budget. And I personally am not a fan of the traditional don't eat out or don't you dare get a coffee from a cafe type of budgeting, because money is also about living our lives right now, and being restrictive is not a sustainable way to save. So what I like to practice is called values-based budgeting. And how you start values-based budgeting is first going through all of your spending and asking yourself, does this purchase still bring me value? If you think about that purchase right now, weeks after you've made it, does it still bring a smile to your face? Are you still using it? Does it improve your life? If yes, it's a value. That's something that you should keep spending money on. But if it's a no, if you bought it and you forgot about it, or if it was just an impulse buy, then you aggressively need to cut that kind of spending, because every dollar that you're not wasting on things that don't bring you joy is a dollar that you can put towards your new home. And that's how I saved enough for my down payment at 25. I wasn't depriving myself. I was just spending intentionally on things that mattered to me, and I was cutting out the stuff that didn't. Now, if you want help with your budgeting and saving, I have a very affordable resource where I break down my full values-based budgeting system, including templates that will make your life so much easier, and I will link it in the description. Okay, so now you're saving consistently every month. The next question is, where do you actually put that money? Because we want it to grow faster for you than if you would just be saving by yourself. If you leave it in a regular checking account, that's a mistake. You will end up spending it. And a normal savings account barely pays you anything in interest, so your money isn't really growing. So you have two options here, and they depend on your timeline. If your timeline is short, let's say you want to buy within the next 1 to 3 years, then you want to put your money in a high yield savings account. A high yield savings account is basically a normal savings account, but they pay you more interest than a regular one. So instead of earning 0.1% interest, you might earn 3 or 4% depending on where you live and what's available. And high yield savings accounts are as trustworthy. Usually they are not the typical traditional bank. So for example, a traditional bank, they might have brick and mortar locations, which is where a lot of their money goes. And a high yield savings account might be issued by a bank that doesn't have brick and mortar locations. So they can get you better interest rates because they have less costs elsewhere. So how to find a high yield savings account? You just Google it. Again, depends really on your country. I do have a free list of high yield savings accounts that you could look into, and I will link that in the description as well. So basically what you want to look out for is that you have one with no or low fees, easy access to your money. So you don't want them to be like, oh, you can only touch your money in 3 years because you might need it sooner, and the highest interest rate that you can find. That's the most important thing. Now, if you have a little bit more time, more than 3 years, and you're really planning ahead, then it might make sense to invest a part of your savings so that you have to do less of the heavy lifting yourself. However, you need to be cautious here because you don't want to put your money in anything too risky, because you don't want to end up in a situation where the market crashes right when you found your dream home and suddenly 25% of your down payment is gone. So I would look into safer investment options. Those exist. An example of that would be bonds. Bonds are basically loans that you would give to governments or companies, and they pay you back with interest over time. And that interest can be more than what a savings account offers you. They're way less volatile than stocks stocks, which makes them a better option for people who want to invest their money, but they also want to be able to access it in the next few years. And if you have a longer time and you need a little bit more help to get that down payment together, then you could also consider putting a small percentage, maybe 20 or 30%, into stocks. So for example, index funds or ETFs, just to give your savings a little boost. I have a video where I explain more about that if that's completely new to you, but do know that the majority should stay in safer options because this is not money that you can afford to lose. This money already has a destination, and that's the home that you're going to live in. So the goal really is to preserve your savings and maybe grow them a little, but not take any risks with your future home. All right, so beyond just saving money, you also need to make sure that your financial health is in good shape, because when you apply for a mortgage, the bank is going to look at more than just your down payment. They will be assessing your ability to repay the loan, because if you can't repay the loan, the bank has a problem as well. So they want to make sure that you're a safe bet. And what that means practically is that first, you want to avoid consumer debt. If you're financing things like your car, your phone, or making purchases on installment plans, all of that can count against you. Banks see that as risk because they're thinking, okay, this person is already committed to paying off 5 different things every month. Can they really handle a mortgage on top of all of that? So before you apply for a mortgage, try to pay off as much consumer debt as you can and try to stay away from starting new ones. And also try to not buy things on credits or in installments if you can. Usually it doesn't really work in your favor anyways. Now, you might live in a country where credit scores are a thing. I don't want to get too deep into this because this video is for an international audience, and if you are a US citizen, then there's so many videos about that you can watch. But in general, you want to make sure that you're not missing payments on anything. You're building a track record of being responsible with money. Now, if you are in a country where credit scores are a thing, look into what yours is, how to improve it before you start applying for mortgages. But the bottom line is that banks want to see that you're financially responsible and that you can handle the commitment of a mortgage. Now, let me talk about the hacks that really helped me, because buying your first home is basically about beating out the competition. And that is a little bit harder when you're young because you have less to offer. So my advice is to really play into your strengths. Something that really helped me buying my home is being super flexible, because I didn't have any pressing reason to move. So me and my partner, we could go with the timeline of the seller. We agreed to wait 10 months before moving in, and not everyone can wait that long. The sellers wanted a longer timeline, and because we were flexible, they chose us over other buyers. So think about what it is that you can be flexible in. Maybe it's the move-in date, maybe it's being okay with a fixer-upper that needs some work, or maybe it's being open to different neighborhoods, right? But the more flexible you are, the more options you have and the less competition you face. And in a competitive market, that really can make all the difference. One last thing before we wrap up, and this is an important one. Most countries have first-time buyer programs or assistance schemes, and a lot of people don't even know that they exist. But these programs can offer you lower interest rates, help you with down payments, or even offer grants, which is free money that you don't have to pay back, right? And also think about non-traditional options. So for example, some places they have schemes for making your home more sustainable, which could offer you low interest loans for renovations that you would otherwise have to pay the full buck for. That's something that we did. We got solar panels, we made our home more energy efficient, and all of that with a super low interest rate because that's all subsidized and supported by the government. So before you assume that you cannot afford to buy, do some research and see what programs are available in your country, because you might be surprised at how much help there is out there. All right, guys, that's how I bought my first home at 25 without my parents' money. And if I can do it on a regular salary, you can do it too. Now, if after watching this, you want to learn more about how to start investing, which, as I mentioned earlier, could be helpful in growing your savings, I do have a full video breaking that down step by step, and you can find that video here. And if this was helpful, I'd love it if you like this video and subscribe, because I'm going to keep breaking down money topics in a way that actually makes sense.